Hi, so welcome to another episode on A Day of a Digital Anthropologist. Today we have an exciting guest. We have Smiljana, and thank you so much for being here today, Smiljana, with us. I'm very excited to get to know you and see what it means to be you for a day. How you doing, Smiljana?
I'm doing pretty well, thank you. How about you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. So we're gonna be talking about what it means to be a digital anthropologist in your shoes, what it means to be you for a day. I'm very excited. I'm always excited about these topics because I love to understand people. As anthropologists, we tend to observe and study other people's behavior, understand what it means to be them. But this time around in this podcast, we try to understand the anthropologists, such as yourself. And yeah, so can you give us a little introduction of, who you are and, your little background?
Absolutely. So my name is Smiljana Antonijević, and I am a digital anthropologist. I've been doing digital anthropology basically my entire life, it feels like, or at least my entire career. So my bachelor's, my master's, my PhD, my postdoc, everything was focused on digital anthropology. So basically, I study how people use digital technologies in their work, in their life, and so on. And then that interest in how people use technology also brought me closer to the interest of how we design and develop technologies such that they can better support actually needs of our users, and how we can develop technologies, digital technology in collaboration with people, instead of just imposing certain technological solutions on them. So in addition to my academic work, over the past 6 years, 7 years, I've been engaged also in applied research in software industry, trying to bring our anthropological lens, anthropological knowledge to user research and understanding of user needs.
That is super interesting, and I love it totally. I think it's, we're such an important part from every single industry. I think they should have a digital anthropology now in this era that includes AI, data science. You should have a digital anthropologist, working along the engineers and software developers to have a better, more ethical and cultural way to, create whatever product or innovation that they're doing. So walk me through your typical day. Like, what time do you wake up? What is your morning routine? What does it look like as a digital anthropologist?
Well, I'm not sure that there is really a typical day. So especially since I travel a lot and I do work both in Europe and in the US, and in, academia and in industry and so on. So I don't think that there is a typical day. It depends on the structure of my day. It depends on which project I'm working on currently. Is it an academic project or project in that applied industry setting? Am I in the process of gathering data analysis, writing, preparing some events, teaching, whatever? So the day would be really determined by that. And the reason I'm saying that, so when I am more actively engaged in industry research, which at the moment is not the case. So now I'm on a kind of a pause with industry research. So, I can afford to maybe get up a little bit later, like around 8 a.m. or something like that. When I am doing more actively applied industry research, it sometimes goes from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. and so on, because, for example, the last company where I worked had clients, customers all over the world, and I had to adjust to their time zone and so on. So I would be doing interviews at 6 a.m. or at 10 p.m. and so on. So that's why I'm saying there is not really a typical day.
Yeah, that's totally understandable. And do you have like a specific, when you do an apply digital anthropologist with clients or company, do you have like a specific routine that you follow, such as and you say you meet up with them with different time zones, but you have like a specific like meet up and then do some like training and then start doing the research, or it's at these.
So with clients and with different time zones. So my morning routine was that I would really, especially for those quite early calls, that I would really try to get up early enough. So let's say at least 1 hour prior to my interview with the customer, so that I can really not only get ready physically, like, okay, do my hair and put some makeup or something like that, but actually prepare my brain so that I can start functioning early in the morning and I'm not like, half asleep, but that I can be attentive to actually what customers are saying. Sometimes if the call was really super early in the morning, I would prepare, not actually sometimes, I would say most often, I would prepare the night before all the materials, and I would have them even open on my computer and leave them open so that I have, for example, if there are certain prototypes that I want to show, if there are, I have my interview questions, if there is anything that I want to share with the customer, I would have all that carefully prepared so that, I do not go in the morning and look for that and so on. And so that was that early morning routine. I would often send a reminder to the customer, hey, I'm looking forward to meeting with you. And then I would simply have those calls, which the instant the call starts, I would, of course, wake up and perk up and start listening carefully, because that's something that I simply love to do.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's super great. Yeah, I can relate to that. And what about when, and I know you're a professor as well, how does your routine when you are just, working as an academic and teaching?
So then it is often adjusted to my class schedule, and I used to teach a lot of classes that was simply the schedule that we had in the afternoon and in the evenings. So then my day would be structured in a somewhat different way. I would get up and start, answering emails. There is usually a bunch of emails that I need to respond to. I would prepare, I had usually all the class materials prepared for the day, of course, when I'm teaching, but I would go through those materials, presentation that I have for the class. If there are certain materials that I need to print out, of course, I would print out those materials to bring to my students. And that would basically be the preparation for, like, okay, so what is it? What is the particular? Sometimes I used to do like, if depending on the topic that I'm teaching about, I like to see what are the most recent examples. Because, especially when you're teaching something related to digital technology, artificial intelligence, and so on, things are developing almost on a daily basis. So having examples that are really most recent is often something that is most interesting for students as well. And, gives them that sense of kind of, we are really dealing with some current things and questions.
That is totally true. And that phrase that you said, that we're dealing with daily updates, is totally true. You have to be kept updating yourself, reading new releases of research and stuff like that we're going to be talking later. Okay, so the next question will be like, how do you keep your skills sharp to stay up to date with the latest development in digital anthropology? Are any specific practices or training you engage in a daily? I know you mentioned some steps that you've done when you do your teaching, but if there's any other skills that or steps that you take to be up to date?
Well, what I find very useful is attending conferences and expert meetings and things like that. So simply staying up to date with what your colleagues are doing. And now the concept of a colleague is actually getting broader and broader. So it is not necessarily just what anthropologists are doing. It is whoever is dealing with digital technologies in some ways that are interesting for us. So you can also have engineers who are really very interested in sociocultural issues of technology development and so on. So then that's why I'm saying the concept of colleague is becoming broader and broader. So anyway, I think that going to conferences and expert meetings is an excellent way to do that. What I also do is I'm usually subscribed to or I'm following on Twitter and so on a bunch of people whom I do not necessarily know. Some of them I do know personally, but a lot of them I do not, who are simply doing very interesting work. So following on a daily basis, what new is coming up, what are people promoting and working on and so on is super important. Sometimes I would say it can make you feel dizzy because there is like such an information overload and people are doing on so many things that it is like, oh my God, I cannot possibly keep up with all this. And I do think, I remember I was preparing actually one talk recently. I gave a lecture on public lecture on artificial intelligence and anthropological view of artificial intelligence, and especially something that I call participative AI development. And I really wanted, as I mentioned, that I'm preparing for classes. So for this public lecture, I really wanted to have most up-to-date examples of those different areas related to AI that I was talking about. And I was, doing research all day long about what are those recent examples. And it was one of those elements that it's like, oh my God, okay, just yesterday I looked and today there are already like 58 new examples of something similar. So it's like, I mean, it's really getting a little bit crazy.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I try to keep it to just two, Twitter and LinkedIn, and even those are overwhelming because every time you refresh it, it's so many information, like, targeting you, the algorithm, you see that you're interested in that, and it's like getting all the information that's super important. And then, so the next question is like, what kind of projects are you currently working on, and could you give us a walkthrough of your typical project from start to finish, like in a summarized version, if you?
So it depends again, how do you define a project? Because that's not actually a trick question or just a linguistic question, rhetorical. It really, there are a lot of kind of discussions about how do we define a project. So, if it is a project in the applied setting, it's something different, and the project can actually be like several years because you're developing a product or a service or something like that from the phase of just thinking about it, creating a concept, testing the concept until you release the product. But anyway, so what I'm currently working on, I could mention two projects. One is I'm preparing a webinar on artificial intelligence and human security for the United Nations, and that's something that will be held in October. So I'm working quite actively on, talking to participants that I recruited for that webinar and working with them on preparing their materials and preparing questions and other things that we want to present in that webinar. So that's one thing that I'm currently working on. And then the second project is a project that is very dear to my heart. It is about reviving a destroyed digital library. So it is a library that was bombed and destroyed in World War II. So we are working now with different experts in library science, literature, museology, and so on, and trying to create a 3D reconstruction of that destroyed library with different populating with the books that were there and trying to not only create a digital reconstruction as such, but also to try to revive the spirit of that time a little bit. So, I was talking to users quite a lot, potential users, of course, like with both experts and general population about what is it that they would like to see in that library. So I'm analyzing the data actually a lot related to that project, and analyzing their responses about what is it that they want to see there. And then my task is to translate all those user expectations and requirements into what we usually call actionable insights, so that our development team can then build an application and the 3D model that will be able to support those user expectations and requirements.
Wow, that is such an awesome project. Super cool. We definitely, once are able to talk about more in this release, is it going to be released to the public or just specific people or so, we can be.
It will be an application that everyone will be able to use.
Oh my God, that's amazing. So definitely when that comes out, give me the link or share it, and I will definitely
Sure.
share it with, the other anthropological community so we can have access, because that's something very important and fascinating. I'm all for it. So the next question will be, digital anthropology covers a broad range of topics. How do you balance your focus between areas like online communities, social media, virtual realities, and AI?
How do I balance? Sorry, what was the question? How do I balance my focus or interest?
Your focus between the areas on online communities, social media, virtual realities, on AI.
Well, so online communities, that's something that used to be a topic in the 90s. So that's not even, I do not actually come across the term anymore so often. I mean, I do occasionally, but that's something that used to be a fascination in the 90s. And it's really interesting. So for someone like me who is like, okay, I'm not old, but I'm not young either. So, I was present and aware and doing research in the 90s. That's when I was an undergraduate student. And so it's interesting to follow those different developments. So in the 90s, when the internet and all that appeared, people were, so topics such as online groups and virtual identity and something like that, it was an absolute fascination because it was thought-provoking for people and something completely new, like, oh my God, you can hang out with people online, and you can like make friends, and people can fall in love online and things like that. So it was like a big fascination with that. And then it absolutely became a new normal. So that's why I feel like that people are not really talking about online communities or something like that anymore, because it's like, well, like, okay, so we are all living like that. Or then social media appeared, and then everyone was doing like, I'm doing a research of Facebook and blah, and I'm doing a research on LinkedIn and blah. And I was always telling my students, like, no, you do not want to do research on a particular media platform or even social media as such. You want to do the research on a particular sociocultural topic. So you can do, for example, you can analyze the issue of trust, and then across different media types, across different platforms, across things like that. So I don't think that it is actually super useful to differentiate our work like that. Like, I'm doing research of social media. I don't know. Maybe it's more interesting for some people, but for me, I somehow do not find that particularly useful.
Right. Yeah, no, it's
I,
totally understandable.
yeah,
It's like
yeah.
the question is because a lot of our viewers are not in the industry of anthropology, the anthropologists. So these kind of explanations kind of give them an insight where we
Yeah.
are, what we're trying to explain, because we get a lot of blank faces when we say that we're digital anthropologists. It's like, what do you? So what? What exactly do you do? So when you give those explanations and insight, it's very interesting, and it gives them like a background, an example of what it really is. So next question will be, what are some of the biggest challenges you face in your work, and how do you overcome them, like
There are various challenges. It depends on, again, like what is the area that you are working in. I would say that one of the biggest challenges has been, so we are, and maybe it talks about why people have that face and reaction of surprise when you say that you are a digital anthropologist. Because when you think about that, we have not been trained. We've been trained as anthropologists, not as someone who actually understands technology. And that's been something that has been my challenge ever since I got into that area. So, there is always that kind of latent imposter syndrome, like, am I really? So how is it that I'm dealing with something and trying to analyze and to explain something that I do not necessarily understand completely? So we are dealing with technologies that we do not really and fully understand. And that's something that is getting more and more and more complex because, when you get to the point of like dealing with AI and automation and so on, you find yourself in a situation that even engineers who develop those applications do not really and fully understand them.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we as anthropologists understand it? So that's been a really big challenge for me, staying, again, not only up to date, but like being aware of my own limitations and being able to acknowledge what are the limitations of what I do and do not know and can and cannot understand. I found that to be actually quite useful, acknowledging that kind of limitation. I've done a lot of work with engineers, automation engineers, software engineers, and so on. And I would be talking to them about some topics that they are experts in, and I'm obviously not. So, acknowledging that you do have limited understanding can actually, as an anthropologist, I would always start my interview by, prefacing it and saying, listen, I'm an anthropologist. So please be aware of that while we are talking about all these technologies. And I found that to be often actually very useful in the sense that people do tend to present those complex technologies in a way that is easier for people not trained in that area to understand. So anyway, I think that, simply acknowledging your limitations is not a bad thing.
Yeah, totally understand that, especially when AI evolving every minute. There's so many courses and training and anthropologists. I mean, regardless if you have, a PhD or master's or just undergrad, you have to be constantly updating yourself with all these courses and all the knowledge that is coming every minute. And sometimes it's, like you say, you have to know your limitations and, try
Yeah.
to, yeah, totally. And then what do you find the most rewarding about your role as a digital anthropologist?
It's super interesting. I simply love that. I'm kind of almost surprised, like how I'm discovering and rediscovering every time how much I really love that. I love talking to people. I love really understanding what is it that they're doing and why are they doing that and so on. I talk to some phenomenally interesting people. I was doing research fieldwork in some really fantastic areas and some fantastic sites. Sometimes, quite often, those are physical sites. Sometimes, I will give you just one example of some of the craziest fieldwork that I've done. For example, I've done research in a site that was on a site that was so secure that you couldn't go to a restroom on your own. You had to be accompanied to a restroom because the level of security around that site was so crazy high. So it was a military complex. Sometimes I was doing, or quite often I was doing research in virtual environments. So, my PhD, for example, was done in Second Life, and the entire fieldwork was done online. I used my avatar body to record the interactions and conversations and so on. And, so that's like research that you do with people who are flying around you and who are, you're in the environment like 19th century Paris or something like that, like a fantasy world. So it's simply super interesting. It is super rewarding. People, I find, really like to talk if you know how to approach them, and especially not to ask leading questions, not to presume that you know what they will say and so on. People really like to talk and to show you what is it that they are working on and how do they do certain things and what is it that they like about technology and what is it that they do not like. And I think that it's super interesting. I'm always, while doing digital anthropology, I'm learning a lot. I'm having a lot of fun and I'm learning a lot. And what is not to like?
Yeah, I can see it in your face when you talk about you describing. It's such a light. You feel like, I can see that you're really passionate about this
I
topic.
am.
And I taught high five, me too. I love it. Like I can talk all day long. I mean, it's fascinating that people get to talk and talk more than in real life. We because we live in between. We have our
Yeah.
unreal life personality and also our virtual life. So I find like when I'm doing those research on social digital spaces that people tend to be more talkative than when you're talking in real life. But yeah, that's amazing. What is the best advice you have received that had helped you in your career? And what is the advice will you give to someone who is interested in digital anthropology?
So the first part was the best advice. The best advice. I don't know if there was one particular piece of best advice. Uh, I know the first thing that came to my mind was maybe the worst advice that I got, which was when I was an undergraduate student. And I was already at that time super interested in digital anthropology. And as I said at that time, it was, people were dealing with online relations and social communities, virtual communities, and so on. So I was also getting into all that. And then remember a professor of anthropology who told me then, and they really had like my best intentions at heart, and they told me, well, why are you doing all this internet stuff? There is no future in that. Why are you doing that? And so, I'm glad that I did not take that advice and that I continued working in that area that the anthropology professor at the time thought had no future. Obviously, that was not correct, but some good pieces of advice. I remember when I completed my PhD and started a postdoc in Amsterdam at the Royal Netherlands Academy of Arts and Sciences, and my colleague, who was also my office mate, and at the time he was already a professor and at the university and so on. And he told me, well, listen, you are not a student anymore, but you still have to learn. And that was something that was really fantastically useful, like to simply not think like, oh my God, I'm done with my PhD. I learned everything there is to learn. I can just start applying my expertise and whatever. But it was, just to simply keep you grounded and to make you aware how many things there are to still learn. So that was one really good piece of advice.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think in this field you're always learning. You never stop learning, and I think in every other field too. You're always constantly adapting and learning and updating your skills. Yeah, that's such a great advice. This next question is how do it has to be with the ethical considerations. How do you navigate the ethical challenges that arise in digital anthropology, especially dealing with sensitive online communities or data?
So what I've been doing throughout my entire research is first following what are the latest, that's again keeping up to date. What are the latest recommendations and guidelines and so on that organizations such as AIR and so on come up with related to ethical issues and data security and so on. We know now that at the time when I started doing research in the 90s and early 2000s, there were really not that many formal guidelines and so on. So it was like, okay, you apply some of the standard ethical considerations that you would have in your offline fieldwork and so on, and then people would start slowly to develop particular considerations and requirements related to online research. And of course, as it was becoming new normal and as more and more people started using digital technologies and so on, we now have those like formal government mandated requirements about processing data and so on. So now it is not only about being aware what is it that your community of practice, what kind of guidelines they have, but also what are the particular requirements related to the area in which you are doing research, or if you're processing data from I don't know, big users in Europe, you of course have to respect European regulation for. Now, I don't know. I mean, it's like you know all those requirements. Like, if we are talking about recording this conversation now, do I agree that this conversation would be recorded? That I have the right to tell you to withdraw my data at any point? That you will be, obliged to delete the data if I tell you to do that, and if I ask you to do that, and so on. So those would be just some examples of what I would be telling my interviewees when doing research online.
Yeah, that's super. Yeah, it's lately it's been challenging between understanding what is ethical, how far can you go if you go into like a virtual community, Reddit, or any other group on Facebook, and you're observing specifically in a community about flowers or whatever group that might be, up to what is the crossing the line when gathering data, stuff like that.
So some of the challenges have been the same from the 90s onward, because one of the biggest challenges related to doing research online and with the online communities and so on has been, for example, to lurking. So do you acknowledge your status as a researcher in an online community, and do you tell people I'm here to study you? Or do you pretend to be or act like a participant in one particular group? So, of course, and there are a bunch of things that a person needs to consider, because, we know that if you acknowledge that you're a researcher in a particular online environment, we know well what are the effects of a researcher's presence, so that people would inevitably change the way they act, they talk, and so on, if they know that there is a researcher and that they are being observed, studied, and so on. So you want to avoid that observer effect. And then on the other hand, you also want to stay within some ethical guidelines and considerations, and not to just, be a lurker who will be writing about people or analyzing them without their knowledge. So, I mean, I would say that it depends what is the particular project, what are the current. I remember, for example, doing my PhD in Second Life, as I mentioned. One of my decisions then was that I would not acknowledge that I was a researcher, because I did not want people to change their behavior because of me, but that I would do research only in publicly available areas. I would not go and ask for permission to be in one of the private areas that Second Life had a lot, pretending to be just a participant who wanted to be part of that community. So that I did not want to do. That was the kind of trade-off that I made, that I would attend only publicly available areas where users and people do not necessarily have the same expectation related to privacy as they would in a private area. And yeah, so that was the trade-off.
Yeah, that's the same thing I find, when I'm doing my current research. So it's it's a little tricky, challenging step of doing that kind of virtual research. My next question will be, how do you maintain your work-life balance in the field that is so deeply connected to the digital world?
Well, that is hard because I find myself actually spending way more time staring at the screen or screens of different types that I would necessarily like. So, I'm really trying to be more aware of that and to drag myself, away from the computer or the cell phone or the iPad or something like that into nature or the gym or something like that, to kind of really contrast that with this kind of too much online presence that we sometimes have. You're reading online, you're grading online, you're talking to people online, everything is online. So it's like, oh, okay, I need to rest a little bit and to absorb some of the offline things.
Yeah, the real person for say, but yeah, it's very difficult because our work is basically be sitting in a computer, observing and just learning and talking to people 24/7, basically, even though when you're not interviewing, observing certain virtual community, you are taking notes. In a way, you are still connected to the, to the computer.
I mean, so my research before COVID was actually quite different. I did do a lot of online research, of course, but I also had done a lot of offline research. So, I would go. So, for example, I mentioned that going to different um, highly secure environments here in the US because we were developing software of that kind. Or, for example, I was working for one big pharmaceutical chain here that was also developing new electronic system for all of their pharmacies. So I went to all the pharmacies that they had in different states because there are different state requirements related to data processing and so on. And I would simply be sitting in the pharmacy and observing pharmacists work and how they use technology and so on, talking to them and feeding that into the requirements that we had for the new electronic system that we were developing. Or I've done quite a lot of work, quite a lot of research in the area of digital humanities, where I've done a lot of research going to offices of scholars, such as philosophers, art historians, and so on, and observing again, how do they integrate digital technologies of different kinds into their work. So a lot of my work has been done offline.
Do you think after the pandemic, your work has shifted more towards online?
Yes.
And before?
So during the pandemic, of course, all the research was done online. That was the only way in which we could do research. And I think that it became like, I don't know, I would not say a new normal. It's certainly not there yet, but it is way more common than it was before the pandemic.
Oh, I see.
That's something that I miss. I mean, you have on the one hand, because doing field work can be quite expensive, and that's also one of the reasons why I think the different organizations started. Oh, you can do that all online. You do not necessarily have to go there, and we are losing a lot. We are losing a lot. There are some very specific insights that you can really gain only if you're on site where
Serving the person in real life instead of just having a Zoom meeting that you don't get to see the whole picture behind.
Absolutely.
That is true, right? So the other question would be, do you work more independently or do you often collaborate with other research institutions or communities?
Well, it depends again. So in the past, I used to do more work on my own as an individual researcher. I'd go and study certain things and write about that and so on. Now I'm still doing that a lot, but over the past maybe 10 years or something like that, as I got much more involved into, as I told you, not only analyzing how people use technology, but also how we can develop different technologies in industry setting or in cultural heritage or anything like that. So I'm now working a lot with different teams, with engineers, with developers, with data scientists, with people from the legal sector, because there are usually a lot of legal issues that we have to resolve and so on. So I would say that my work is now maybe 60% working collaboratively with different teams and people from other areas of expertise.
Yeah, yeah, I noticed. I noticed that too. It depends, the area that you're doing research or working on. It tends to fluctuate. Okay, so our next question. It's this question I should add it to the podcast because I think it's very important when you do a lot of research or for people who's interested in joining this field, becoming a digital anthropologist, you tend to do a lot of research to understand what you're getting yourself into because at the end of the day, as much as you're passionate, you want to get paid as well. You want to you want to be able to afford you pay your bills. So the question is, what can someone expect in terms of compensation when starting out in digital anthropology? And how does it change with experience? And if you can give us like a range of, if you feel comfortable telling, what, you were getting paid on your last job. So people have an idea because sometimes they're going into freelance and academics and there is no way to, because online there's nothing to tell you, yeah, digital anthropologists will be earning 50,000 a year. So there's no data to kind of get that data to, present when you are hired as a digital anthropologist.
That's something that depends on the context again. So it depends in which country are you working. So as I said, I'm doing quite a lot of work in different European countries as well as in the US. So the pay range and so on depends on what is the country in which you're doing research. It also depends quite a lot on whether you're doing academic research or applied research. Academic research tends to be less paid, as we know. Industry research is much better paid, usually, especially if you work like in a big software company, like I was working and so on. So in general, applied work in industry tends to be much better paid. Then there are different options as far as I could see. So you can be a full-time employee and work for a particular, salary and pension matching and insurance and so on. Or if you want to continue working on something else, you can work on an hourly basis and simply be paid. I mean, it's relatively easy to check what are the hourly rates that are being offered for user research and jobs of that type. So I would say, if you're working on a particular project for which you got a grant, you often designated in advance what would be the salary of a researcher. So that's kind of determined in that way. So those are all the options. I do not really have experience, or I have very limited experience working as an independent consultant. Because most of my work was done in institutions, at universities or software companies and so on. I have very limited experience working as an independent consultant, so I cannot really talk about that. It seems to me like something that should be available to anthropologists, and I'm sure that there are people who are doing that successfully. But I'm not sure what are really the barriers that you need to get over when you want to do something as an independent consultant. And again, what would be an appropriate hourly rate, which again, I guess would depend on, as I mentioned, what is the country in which you're working on, what is the area, like, I don't know, are hourly rates higher in healthcare than in education, and so on.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. So the next question is, what do you see the field of digital anthropology heading in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I can say what is it that I would like to see. And I would like to see, I believe, first of all, that like we almost got rid of that designator digital humanities. So we are talking just about humanities uh, and humanist researchers that are using a lot of digital resources and tools and methods and so on without even acknowledging, because it became really an integral part of their work. So I believe that that's going to happen with anthropology as well, and that anthropologists will start using digital tools, methods, and so on, without necessarily acknowledging too much that they are doing digital, because, it will be simply something like, everyone is now looking for literature and reading online, and no one is saying like, I'm doing digital reading or something. So I think that will be one part. I would like to see much more of collaborative efforts and projects between anthropologists and people in other areas, such as engineering, data science, and so on, because I think that that's something not only that it would be for us as anthropologists, or especially if you are doing some kind of digital anthropology, it is more than useful to have those types of collaborations. It is also essential that anthropological perspective be brought to those developments, so that we actually can talk to people in engineering, in data science, in software development about why certain considerations that we have are valid and should be applied and should be implemented, and so on. So there are simply so many aspects that we are aware of and that we should bring to those to that future development of technology. And that's something that I definitely hope to see.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward. And then the last question is, at the end of the day, how do you wind down and what do you do to reflect on after a day of working in digital anthropology?
I watch a rom-com. No, I'm joking. How do I? Well, I mean, it is true that I like to sometimes go into some kind of escape, like I was saying, just to detach from the digital and from the screen. So, to go for a walk, to go to a concert, to go have a beer somewhere, to cook. I love to cook. And, so those are some of the areas that I am really kind of, I'm charging through all those activities that are, I found it to be also very useful if you're doing with a lot of digital and online things, to also find something that you would be doing with your hands. And that's very tactile, and also something, because, when you're doing research, it can take a while, regardless of whether it is applied research or academic research. It can be a while to see the results of your work. So doing with something like, cooking or whatever, where you see the results right away, is also something that is kind of rewarding and can be a way of, simply, charging yourself.
That is true. Yeah, I try to, well, it's kind of difficult because, you attach to your phone or your computer, but I try
Yeah.
to have even though I work in, observing as a digital anthropologist for a living, I try to have like sometimes weekends of detachment from technology. I just turn off my phone for 24 hours or 48 hours
detox.
It's amazing. It's a detox. Yeah. A technological detox. I've done it. I do it like every couple of months, and I will highly suggest it for digital anthropologists out there, because sometimes we get absorbed into the world, especially if you do sensitive work like this information sometimes it kind of gets to you. So, it's helpful. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I am super excited that we met and we did this podcast. Can you talk about more about the presentation that you are having, or where they can find it, where they can register if they want to attend online or in person?
Yeah, sure. So I can send the webinar that I mentioned will be held on October 17th. And we will be talking about AI and human security. We will have 4 experts who will be talking from 4 different angles about that topic. So one will be artificial intelligence and social sciences. So we will have a person who is an anthropologist dealing with emerging technologies, and who will be talking about how anthropologists can deal with those emerging technologies. We will also have a person who will talk about artificial intelligence and medicine. She's a professor in the Netherlands who has done a lot of work on artificial intelligence and genetics. So she will be talking about that work. Then we will have another expert also from the Netherlands who has developed the topic will be artificial intelligence and climate. So he and his team have developed a really fantastic ChatGPT-like application for climate data. And he will be talking about that. And then we will also have a professor of law who is dealing quite a lot with legal aspects of artificial intelligence, and who will be talking about different regulations and areas that still need to be regulated, and how that kind of legal regulation affects all of our activities and so on. So those will be 4 main areas, and that will be on October 17th.
Oh my God. So definitely send us the link so I can post it along your podcast. And I'm going to be definitely attending, because
Sure.
that's the topic that I'm in. I love it. I'm specializing in AI. So it's right on my alley.